So now, without any further ado, let's welcome our moderator, James DiBiasio, founder and editor of DigFin. Let's welcome James to come up on stage. Hello. You can be seated over there, and then we will be having our staff giving you the mic. And then also our panelists from IMC Asia Pacific, Web3 Harbor, Blue Artificial Intelligence, Emergent X, and FinStep Asia. Let's give them a big round of applause and welcome them on stage. All right, so let's welcome Angelina, Asmaid, Jeffrey, Michelle, and Legendra. Welcome you all. All right, so please kindly be seated according to the back. All right. All right, I'll now pass the stage to James. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Check. Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. Great to see so many friends on stage here. We have a very interesting topic. It's really, we're going science fiction here. We're not going to pretend that the convergence of AI and blockchain is a thing. It's not a thing. But we've already heard it mentioned in the morning. Some people are thinking about this. And so what I think we want to do is talk about why is this something that people are thinking about? Is this just another hype thing? Is this just, you know, another solution looking for a problem? Or is there something to this that we should be thinking about, and this could be a source of funding, a source of innovation and direction for the next several years, probably much longer than that, but at least maybe things will start to happen, or should they happen? So we're going to discuss that. And what we have here up on stage is a mix of people with deep experience in digital assets and in AI. And I think Angelina, with her regulatory connections and know-how, is going to perhaps the closest thing to a bridge that we have, but we'll save you for last. And we're going to talk it out and try to figure out, like, what does this convergence mean? And is it something that we should take seriously? So just to introduce myself, my name is James. I run a media business here called DigFin Group. And that's been going on for a little over 7 years. I write about all things fintech, basically, digital finance, digital assets, fintech, all the big verticals in the world, payments, insurance, capital markets, asset, wealth, banking. So let's get started. Raj, you're going to be my first victim. You've got expertise in AI. You teach about AI. You've got your own business that helps other companies think about AI. Let's just start right now with the adoption rates for enterprises. We're talking about enterprises today as well. I wanted to clarify that. We're not going to talk about the retail segments. Where are we with AI? Is a broad animal. We've had, you know, natural language processing, neural networks, all this stuff for the past 10, 15 years. Gen AI, 2 years now. But when we're talking about enterprise adoption, you can maybe set the stage for where we're at, very broad brushstrokes in terms of financial institutions or corporations using AI. Some of them are very advanced. Some aspects of this are old school. Some are new. And then from there, we'll get a sense of, same in the digital asset space, and then we'll start to combine these.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for that first question. Really, before I answer it, I just want all of you to think about what are the top 5 apps you use on your phone every day. It could be payments app, media app, banking app, or social media. And when you think about all the apps you're using, they're all using AI in some way. Social media apps are recommending content to you. E-commerce applications, they're again recommending products that you want to buy. Your banking app is collecting data on what you're doing, what your spending patterns are. They may have a chatbot that you use. So when you think about it, everything you use, everything you interact with on a day-to-day basis, they're learning about you. And they're using that information to really find patterns in a large data set, which is all of us. And they're using that pattern recognition to like predict outcomes. So if you're a trading institution, you're trying to predict asset prices. You're trying to predict revenues and financial metrics of companies that you follow. And then you really want to use machine learning and AI to make decisions at massive scale, whether it's recommending products, detecting fraud in a banking context, or even understanding human conversations where we have chatbots and now generative AI. So with the stage set like that, when we think about what are enterprises using AI for, they're using AI for just making broad-based business decisions. And most of this you don't even see as a customer because they're using it internally. So banks, they may popularize that they're working on a chatbot, but they're investing a lot of AI dollars into risk management, detecting fraud, money laundering, terrorist financing, and things like that. And in terms of what type of AI they're using, the supervised machine learning, decision trees like XGBoost models, they're still the most popular kind of AI applications used in enterprises because the pipeline for developing these tools is mature. People tend to understand how to develop it and implement it. In the last year or so, we're seeing a growing interest in generative AI technologies, especially large language models. So I've talked to some people that are trying to build these tools internally for use cases such as, can we build like an internal Google search to search through our entire database? So our employee, they have the knowledge of the entire firm on call. Can we create these kind of employee trading and onboarding virtual agents where if I'm a new employee, I talk to that language model and get up to speed on what my job is. And they're also talking about, can we create customer-facing applications where it can give you advice on what product is a good fit for you. So they're trying to build these things. They're still in the early stages. And I think as this conversation goes on, I can try to talk about how to build these things effectively.
One point I want to make on that, Raj, your observation is that the first set of things that you referenced, businesses have been doing for a very long time. I mean, they used to call it business analytics, right? So the goal and the output is old hat, but obviously the technology makes it possible to use bigger data sets, faster, more sophisticated. But when you talk about the Gen AI stuff, that's new. And also, because the technology, although it has its hallucinations and all its problems, it's very intuitive. You don't need to be a chief technology officer to understand it. So there's this kind of real ground up building of projects. And so it's a very different dynamic for an enterprise, a bank to manage because it can be much more about their own people using it rather than creating some big architecture. Could you just very briefly touch on how this could change the way the enterprises think about using these tools?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And I think one of the reasons that generative AI is so popular and there's so much enthusiasm to build around it is because all of us have used or at least seen people use these tools outside of a business context. If I ask how many of you have played with a machine learning model, the answer is probably close to zero unless this is what you do for work. If I ask the people in the room, how many of you have used a large language model, many hands will go up. My mother uses it. I'm sure my grandfather could be taught how to use it. So once companies see that, oh my gosh, this is possible, then their next question is, let me start experimenting with this in-house. I cannot use ChatGPT at my firm because of certain data security and data privacy issues, but I know what it can do for me. Now let me try to build something that it can use to help my firm.
Okay. Mushir, FinStep, you yourself have been working in Dubai as a regulator on digital assets. You advise a lot of companies on this. Enterprise adoption, we've heard a lot about this, so let's keep this part a little shorter today because we've already heard quite a bit more on the Web3 retail side, but enterprise-wide, is this still the solution looking for a problem, or are we getting real uses now at the big picture level?
This on Web3 and blockchain or AI?
Digital assets and blockchain, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I guess what we've reached now with regards to enterprise adoption of blockchain is a stage where it's become one of the two main feasible options when it comes to building new technology. A lot of times, earlier it was like we can do a POC on maybe a small bit and see how it goes. Essentially, 15, 16 years since Bitcoin came into existence, you now have serious maturity for a good number of layer ones and layer twos, right? Which then allows financial institutions in particular who need stability, right? We are all being part of financial institutions where the tech is a decade old or maybe even more, right? I've sat in a bank in the same building and looked at a computer which is 15 years old and software may be older, right? But long story short, I think with blockchain now maturing and being able to both scale and be fairly secure if there are the right cybersecurity controls around it, the adoption has increased from multiple activities. As always, I think capital markets and payments tend to be the leaders when it comes to enterprise adoption and financial services for new innovation. So we are seeing, a lot of large-scale use cases around stable coins, around just the use of coins which are native to an organization, the JPM coin, MEFG coins, which are matured now for large-scale applications. On the other side is what we are seeing with regards to digital assets themselves, gaining prominence because of the involvement of BlackRock, and that's been spoken to death. But just that signaling allows a lot of other participants to come in on board. So for me, I've always said this, when you have large institutions stepping into new technology, that gives not just legitimacy, but it provides a sense of security for the broader tier 2, tier 3, and adjacent industries. So banks who are local banks who haven't adopted blockchain will now look at blockchain vendors as a feasibility after HSBC's gone and done tokenization of gold at a retail level as well, right? So I think that's an important element. So from my view, we have reached maturity. Is it the only option or the main option that everybody's gyrating to for applications? Not yet, but for certain applications and use cases I would say yes. And if you're building a new stack, it is almost a very strong consideration for blockchain plus cloud versus using your own stack and older technology because you feel things will move forward.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey, I'm going to skip over you for a moment. Esme, I'd like to ask you to follow up because we're talking about that. Esme, you recently worked at a large bank. You were in charge of a lot of the innovation projects there. Give us a sense between the AI side and the blockchain side. Where did you experience uptake at that level? What feels real in terms of the way that a large global financial institution is using these two categories of technology?
Right, thanks for the question. So yeah, you're very right to point out that most recently, so I've been, actually the bulk of my career has been in global banks. And I've been the head of digital assets on one side and also the head of AI. So I'll be speaking with different people, whether driving entrepreneurship, as Jay mentioned, in terms of pilot projects internally, for example, streamlining efficiency, tokenization, or whether it's on the AI side, it'll be about just streamlining, using maybe doing like a chatbot for customer service. That's the most basic part, but also pulling in all the on-prem data in order to generate predictive analytics, especially around the stock market. And externally, so advice, because my other role would be investment advisory in AI and digital assets, so I speak with sovereign wealth funds globally and also with pension funds in terms of their asset allocation. So I do wish to share an anecdote, and that will tie directly into what Jay mentioned. So having two hats, what I do is whenever I book a meeting with like a pension fund, I always have two meetings. So the first one will be the digital assets investment team, and the other will be the AI team. And that's the same when it comes to speaking with like global Fortune 500 companies or the BATs in China. So I would then always have 2 meetings. So that's where you can see there's always there's a convergence definitely maybe next year. But right now I would say that it's still rather like mixing water and oil. And I do want to add one point, and that ties directly into what Raj mentioned. And I think ultimately it all depends on the attention economy. What we see when ChatGPT went viral 2 years ago, that was exactly when it spilled over to the entire billion of users globally. And that is what we're waiting to see blockchain pan out, right? And then we saw that after 3 years of crying wolf, so we finally see that the institutions are adopting different blockchain solutions. So I expect that for next year, given there's so much technology, interoperability solutions being built out, so we're going to see a seismic change next year when it comes to retail users.
Okay, that's a very big prediction from Esme. You heard it here first. Thank you for that. So now, Jeffrey, I want to bring you into this. So we've heard now kind of adoption at the enterprise level of both these technology segments. But we want to start getting into the meat of what we're talking about is how do these start to work with each other? Should they start to work with each other? Why are we even talking about this? So Jeffrey, I know you're doing a lot of work at Web3 Harbor and also in your previous day jobs. Walk us through, like, is this a conversation that you're having at your association? Is this something that people in the Web3 space are talking about? And how are they framing this discussion?
What I've noticed is actually the framing discussion is almost a competition, AI versus blockchain, right? You go to the last 2 or 3 main events around the world, it's like, oh, all of a sudden the VCs are looking at AI. What about blockchain? Well, the thing is, it's about the application of AI with the data sets coming from blockchain ecosystems. Because you think about it, like how many blockchains are actually out there? We're talking layer 1s, layer 2s, layer 3s, and now we're talking about layer 0s. The fragmentation and complexity of the data is very difficult for any current legacy systems or digital systems or even humans to manage. And so from an interoperability perspective, predictive management, self-healing, these activities, which are very common topics that Web 2 has been talking about for the last 7-10 years with cloud transformation. These different activities are now moving into blockchain stacks. So just a little context, like I've been in technology advisory consulting in Hong Kong and Greater Bay Area for about 8 years now, 4 years with traditional companies, and then 4 years in blockchain. The 4 years earlier was basically, oh, how do I save costs? How do I manage, like focus on change management with AI and new technologies in the form of chatbots, data modernization, business intelligence analytics, dashboarding, right? And then from now on the Web3 side, it's mainly, okay, how do we optimize our databases, our data sources, standardization. It's finally, you're getting to a point where there's applications and killer applications that are looking at how to generate revenue and income for idle assets. For example, in decentralized physical infrastructure, DePIN. This past 2 weeks, I've been in both 3 weeks actually, Korea and Singapore, seen some really interesting startups that are now applying AI with blockchain infrastructure with tokenomics to really incentivize people to share idle assets, whether it's for rendering and compute, whether it's for nanogrids, meaning sharing their data from energy consumption, and then using artificial intelligence to actually optimize that into something that could make them money while you're being idle. Which is very different than what we're so used to in Web3, which is just mining and then staking, right? So this is basically another layer of applied applications on top of that. And so I guess getting back to the point is, the way it's been framed is very competitive, and I think it's extremely synergetic. And then moving forward, I really do believe that the use cases both from B2B and B2C will converge. All of these other components we're talking about today, which are settlement with stablecoins, the infrastructure interoperability from Web3, we're just waiting for clarity from data compliance, as well as clarity from how do we use virtual assets for settlement of these payments activities.
Right. But in some of those, is it really just a regulatory clarity issue anymore? So with DPIN, are we just adding complexity, a tokenization layer on top of something that doesn't need it? Same with then issues around this competition.
Yep.
Is this a competition of innovation, or is this a competition of I'm a VC and OpenAI just scored a $157 billion valuation. I want to be in that game. So just throwing a few things back at you, Jeff, just give us a sense of how much of this is kind of wishful and how much of this do you think is actually practical and being people starting to work on this with actual backing and
Yep.
and proofs of concept.
So let's just quickly break it down to 3 personas, right? So you have VCs and investors that will be interested. You have users that actually want something, a problem to be solved. And then you have basically the players that provide either the infrastructure, the services, or whatever. The old school products that service those two, the interconnect between those two. We have to be very careful that we start creating deep-in solutions for things that don't need it, right? I mean, you think about back in when we had ride-hailing and whatnot, those were killer use cases, and then people were like sharing bikes and whatnot, and then sharing all sorts of different assets. Not every asset needs to be on-chain, so that's one thing. And then from the valuation, the VC side, now it's very much about general purpose blockchains are not really receiving any interest from investors. They have to be purpose-bound layers.
Yeah, who made money on TCP/IP?
Yeah, and so it's going to be ubiquitous. I mean, these standards will become invisible, and as Raj said earlier, it's going to be the various different use cases. What you want to do. I want to order food. I want to take a cab somewhere. Instead of being on a traditional database, now it's on a decentralized infrastructure. It's just a modernization of that. And I really do believe, and I'll leave here, that there's a great opportunity for super apps to really, really leverage AI and blockchain properly. That's the real kicker moving forward.
Okay, all right. I thought a super app had everything in one house, so they wouldn't want to decentralize. But Angeline, I've been saving you for last because you're our heavy hitter here. You have a broad range of experience as an investor, as an entrepreneur in the blockchain space, contacts with the regulators and so on. My first question is really kind of generic here. You've listened to these folks talk from their different perspectives. And I would like you to maybe give us a sense of where you see, maybe from a regulatory point of view, but also from an entrepreneurial point of view, where do you see the lines of beginning to converge, if they're going to converge? What's the opportunity that you think could emerge from this?
I personally think AI is here to stay and is going to grow, and the adoption is just moving so quickly, it's actually scary to me. I think this will be an area that investors will be looking at, and I think there are a lot of investment opportunities in this area. So one question is, should we all be jumping into, instead of digital asset projects, should we be jumping into AI and digital asset projects? That's something that's definitely interesting right now. But we're still in the probably nascence of artificial intelligence. You're seeing it, as Raj laid out, in most of the major apps, in our selections, and now, at least if we're going to buy a record or a book or something like that, the recommendations will come out a lot faster through AI. And I have to say, using it in my work, it's just cut down so much time, and just finding and doing research has just made my life a lot easier. So with this comes great responsibility. And it's very interesting because people have really not said very much about the responsibility part. And I think the regulators have already started on this. And for those of you who work with the Securities and Futures Commission or work with financial services regulators, we've already had our first drafts of guidance notes that will hold the people using artificial intelligence responsible for irresponsible use of it, and checking and making sure that the recommendations coming out are fit for purpose. And partially it's because a lot of houses have already started mentioning that, yeah, we're using it on our recommendations to investors about what stocks to buy based on their backgrounds, based on what they've previously acquired before. So the SFC is really actually worried. I've never seen them so worried about this. And they've come out with the first, second, and now third draft of a guidance note of what they will be requiring all licensed persons. And that includes virtual assets persons, as well as brokers, as well as asset managers and investment advisors about responsibilities. And it's not just the SFC that's doing this. It's other regulators around the world are also looking at the responsibilities. So you just can't blatantly use AI to be the be-all and end-all. You must use it responsibly, and you must use it with care. And that's something I think that's very interesting, because if you notice with digital assets, there weren't any child warnings when we started first introducing tokens and tokenization. But AI, it's been very, very quick because they're seeing how it's affecting people as if it's the truth. And that's something, how do we see truth versus a recommendation based off of information that has been learned? And that's something, as us as humans, we really need to be very careful with what we do with AI. And I mean, when I use it, I triple check everything before I actually publish something, because I'm really worried that something's going to go wrong. So,
what is the way that you think a mass adoption technology like AI has become, which is why the regulators are so on top of this so now, and I think they also regret the way they didn't regulate social media Web 2.0.
Exactly.
They probably, I don't think they have the same regret with anything sort of blockchain related. They just went on an enforcement craze.
Yes.
And we could debate if that was the right thing to do or not, but that's what happened. And it was fairly contained within people that sort of opted into that world. What then is the opportunity within the digital asset space, now that it has matured? We kind of have a better feel for what's going to work, what's not going to work. We hear kind of this generic idea of accessing data from this space and then teasing it with LLM type technologies.
Exactly.
What does that mean in reality? Like, what's the quality of this data? Do you have a sense of, how would anybody, what can we get out of it that you can't get from some other source? How easy would it be to actually use this data?
This is the thing that's still out for debate about how good is the information. I mean, for you and I that need to write a paper quickly or need ideas, I can say that, wow, ChatGPT just really thinks of things that I never thought were out there. But when it comes to more complex issues and life or death issues, then shouldn't we be all checking it if it has to do with a formulaic medicine for the cure of some disease, and you're using AI to actually do regression testing or come up with ideas in terms of improving medicines or improving on recommendations about types of meds or things like that. And I think this is where the creators of artificial intelligence really will need to be very, very careful and make sure that their algorithms that are coming up with these enhancements each time, they're going to really need to be able to check this. Now, we have not seen any case law on this yet, and it's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how some investment advice that came out of ChatGPT and seeing some firm being sued because of it, and they'll say, well, you know, I only pulled it out of ChatGPT. And this is what the SFC is saying. You're using it, it's your head. So make sure that if you're using it, you better make sure it's right, because it's your reputation. And not just the SFC is going to hold you responsible. I think your clients are going to hold you responsible, as they would with ChatGPT also. So I don't know if that, I hope that answers your question.
Nope, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
These are unanswerable
Yeah.
questions. The point today is we're not going to get to some hard, solid, yes, it's X, Y, or Z. We're just going to try to frame this, because I think this is going to be a topic that's going to be important going ahead.
And the litigation is going to be really important.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That will be the proof in the pudding.
Right, yeah, because liability is always an issue with these things, and maybe we'll get into that. Jeffrey, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I think I'm hearing the question. I think the question might be like, from the AI perspective, what is the real problem? I think the real problem is bias and noise that you get inherently just based on the data sets and how it's being processed. And then the next one is, okay, so how do we solve for this? And how do we solve for this with blockchain? And so blockchain itself, the promise of blockchain, some of the principles, automation and governance, traceability and transparency, etc. And so if you take those core basic functions as an infrastructure level, apply it to how the data models are actually working in the back end from the AI algorithms, then you can then build in, with the help of regulators, guardrails, controls, checkpoints, where people and AI and other automated processes can actually manage that workflow. And then that can be used for an application. That can be used for, like, you know, some business workflow. And so I think that's where the value is for, let's say, regulators, for core business B2B applications, to really understand, okay, how do we use AI and blockchain together to get the control that we want back, and to filter out, you know, damaging or unethical noise and bias in the specific models.
So if I may just build, one of the other things, and Angelina touched upon it, is liability, right? Now, when you look at AI and you look at DeFi or decentralized, the main challenge is liability. So a lot of times when we spoke about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, the question is who's responsible, right? When any activity takes place, which may be illegal, and there's different legal frameworks for that. In a similar way, if you're using an AI model developed by ChatGPT available online and modified, who's responsible? I think the SFC actually have been fairly good at this. This may not be a popular opinion necessarily, but the SFC came out with what was known as the manager in charge regime about 8 years ago, right? And this is when I was in the consulting world doing SFC-based audits. But it was an important step from moving, saying you had responsible officers who had criminal liability as well, but manager in charge brought in that professional liability for heads of algo trading, as a very classic example, or operations or IT. That kind of is approach I see that can be practical and applicable in the going forward. Is if you are the head of a certain division, you can't say, oh, the algo did this, because you are responsible for ensuring training, testing, etc., and such that it works properly for long impact. So classic example of that is, if you want to go look it up, is a case of Knight Capital, who had an issue with an algorithm that went rogue and led to $600 million of loss. And it was eventually Knight Capital had to have the liability and were faced fines. But you do have examples where AI has been used in large-scale models for over 20, 30 years, and there are models that can be applied in a similar way for liability when it comes to modern-day application, because the person using it, or enterprise using it in this case, should have tested it out before they are allowing it, or have the right warnings that allow for the risk to take place. But a right mechanism. So the final piece on this, sorry I'm saying, which we don't talk about so much, is going to be insurance. How do you ensure models for AI that are being deployed and the liability that associated with it? I don't see too much being spoken about it. I think that's going to become very critical, because once you have insurance, then it's a lot more easier both for the regulator as well as the enterprise to start adopting AI when there is less predictability than before.
I think Mushi has brought up a very good business plan, because I have not seen anything in the area of insurance for AI at all, and the use of AI. So I think for those of us who are looking for new projects to do, that might be an interesting thing. And whether or not Lloyd's or other insurance agencies will actually be offering this, because you know how hard it was for digital assets to get insurance.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, so I think that's probably the most concrete thing that we've been able to unearth at this panel so far. We still have 10 minutes to get some other business ideas. Esme, I asked you earlier about your previous life as a banker. Now tell us a little bit about Emergent X. You've been listening to these folks. Where do you see some opportunities?
Yeah, sure. So right now we're building a decentralized expert network. So we were using AI in order to drive a lot of the forecaster kind of like credit of different people. And we use AI algos to come up with a credit rating for each person, and whether, especially when you look at Web3, so there could be a lot of rug pulls. It's supposed to be trustless, but you don't really know who to trust, right? So therefore, we come up with this whole concept around it. And, just so that's my founder perspective. And from another angle, which is the investor perspective, I think right now, if I were more skeptical at this juncture, it's mostly about the crypto bros trying to get a valuation re-rating upwards when it comes to layer in a AI narrative to their project, right? So that is how a lot of the, even some of, not the crypto native funds, but more of the Web 2.5 funds, the way that they approach this.
Okay. So valuation games, always exciting. 1 second, Raj. We've got a few minutes left here. I've got one or two more things I want to ask these guys, but happy to take a question from the floor. I can share my mic with you. So if you would like to pose a question about this convergence topic, think about it. You got just a couple minutes. Raj, I guess the way that current LLMs are being sold and used is through this concept of the agent, right? Like a co-pilot or something like that. After hearing your fellow panelists talking about the way that it could interact with a blockchain environment, can you give us a sense of what an agent means in that context? Like, are these compatible? Or would we have to rethink the way that people would be using AI tools if everything ended up on some sort of decentralized platform and some kind of tokenomics built into that?
Yeah, so an AI agent is essentially a tool built through generative AI that can perform multiple tasks in order without human supervision or even like human guidance beyond the initial prompt. Now, Mark Zuckerberg last week was saying that he envisions a future where everybody, whether you're an individual content creator or if you're working in an operations department or a finance department, everybody's going to have the ability to spin up multiple AI agents that help them perform a bunch of different tasks throughout a workflow. And it basically, in my view, can take care of the logical, routine, repetitive work and frees up a lot of time for really white-collar workers, content creators, to focus on the things that actually matter, to focus on the work that they do that actually...
My Minesweeper game is going to be so next level.
There we go. It's a little bit of a throwback point that you make, but I grew up playing Minesweeper, so I appreciate it.
I'm old.
Yeah, so that's the future that they're going to, AI agents performing tasks autonomously. We're not there yet, let's be honest. I use ChatGPT every day and I find it makes like really silly mistakes to the point where you're like, I'm glad I don't use this in like a professional setting because of the liability issues. So how do we get to the agent level? A lot of organizations that I speak to they want to not build their own large language models, but they want to take an open source language model from Meta or Cohere or Mistral or somebody else and do something called fine tune it. So it's like taking a very smart college student, sending him or her to an internship to make him or her knowledgeable in what a company does. So that's what they're doing. They're fine tuning an existing LLM on company specific knowledge. And once you do that, they have there's some pretty good use cases that come up in terms of creating a customer service agent that actually understands what the company's buying and selling. Creating like an advisory kind of tool or virtual assistant that can help an employee perform tasks day to day. So this is really the stepping stone we're seeing to building these kind of AI agents. We got to take it step by step. And when I talk to IT directors at investment banks, then they're saying, and I ask them, are you doing this? They're saying, you know what, we're taking it very slow because that data that the LLM is interfacing, we don't know if it's correct. We don't know if it's up to date. We don't know if it has like mistakes in it. So we're worried about the liability. And they're saying we're building first with isolated use cases in areas where the cost of being wrong is not going to get you in trouble with the regulator. It's not going to get you sued from your customers. And they're taking these lessons learned to slowly scale up over time. So really the last point about agents is it's not going to come tomorrow in an enterprise setting. We're going to see this happen hopefully in a structured way over the next few years. And the last thing I'll say is that I'm pretty bullish on what Hong Kong's doing from a regulatory standpoint, because last month the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, they set up this generative AI sandbox, where it's an environment where financial institutions, fintechs in Hong Kong, they can, with regulatory guidance and blessing, kind of build an experiment with these generative AI tools, be it chatbots, enterprise search agents, or anything else. So it's through like structured, common sense approaches like this, where we're actually going to see AI agents that make the work we do a lot easier.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Raj. I feel like we're getting on a good note to finish, but I would like to offer anybody in the audience the opportunity to ask a question. You can raise your hand or walk up. Anybody? Talk about convergence of these two mega trends in the technology space. Are you ready for it?
No liability, it's okay.
All right, how about just a quick raise of hands? Do you think AI and blockchain, does this convergence story intuitively make sense to you? I'm going to ask you if it does, raise your hand. And if it doesn't, and you think we have to all go back and sharpen our pencils, then you can raise your hand for that one, okay? So first one is, yes, this makes sense, it's going to happen faster than we think. Or, I have my doubts, I think we really need to rethink this concept. So first, in the audience, raise your hand if you think this kind of makes sense to you and you can see this taking shape in the next few years.
It's already happening.
Okay, a lot. And then those of you who think that we need to sharpen our pencils and get back to the board and rethink this, raise your hands.
Esme, you're being
Okay.
contrarian.
Okay, one, okay. Okay, aside from the obvious groupthink going on, that's a positive statement. So looking forward to everybody in this room being those innovators who are going to be bringing ideas. Mashir gave you one. Let's see what else you guys got.
I think there's always one conversation we haven't had is the expectation of perfection from AI is a lot higher than any other tool, because we've been brought up with this, forgetting the sentient being that robots can do everything or everything can be accomplished. I think there's this whole need and expectation of AI being perfect. So you want to see that, and also that scares people yes, ChatGPT-01 scared me. So one, it's not going to be that perfect, as Raj mentioned. The second thing, which is very undervalued and underplayed, is inertia in professional services. I was talking to somebody yesterday where they're involved in PR and content. They said, my job's going away. I said, no, because the people are not going to be able to sit and do it. They want somebody to deploy that agent, review the content, because people are not yet sure. So jobs will remain, but most bankers and most professionals are inherently have high inertia, so they will ask somebody to do it rather than driving it themselves. There's a couple of things.
That might be the way that younger people are able to retain their roles, because that internship quality seems under threat to me, because that's essentially what these GPTs are, but perhaps we're still going to need somebody to then tell me how it all fits together.
It's the consulting meme, right? The managing partner sending, please convert this into PDF conversation, which still happens. So, yeah.
Very good.
In terms of human beings, though, ChatGPT and all of these AI models have been fascinating. But these models are only as good as the people that are programming them. And I mean, many of you know that I'm the chair of the Women's Foundation. And we know that many of the IT companies are staffed by men. And I think as people think about how all of these models are being created, it would probably be better that you have a mix of both men and women who can bring diversity into the coding and make and see things differently to work together for a better coding result. And I think this is something that I hope that most of the AI companies are actually thinking about in terms of diversity of coding, diversity of thought, and diversity of planning. So I'd like to leave that with people to think about in terms of making sure that the AI models actually work and are not stilted against either race, sex, or whatever it happens to be.
And I think we'll leave it on that because I think
Can I
that's
just add
a good
really
rule
quick-
going forward. And
Can I
well,
just-
we're out of time, Esme. But I want to thank Abelian for having us up on stage. Thank the audience for your vote. And please, Esme wants to make a point, so go see her when she comes down stage so she can tell you what's on her mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, speakers.